And right at the beginning, Sasaki is smoking on the company rooftop when Suzuki suddenly shows up, saying he'd been looking for him. He mentions that he even searched the smoking area, but couldn't find him there. Sasaki asks if something happened, and Suzuki lets him know that the boss called a last-minute meeting. Suzuki immediately starts complaining, saying the boss's meetings feel eternal, where no one decides anything useful and everyone just talks in circles. After venting, Suzuki sighs that he just wants to go home. During work, Sasaki always helps his colleagues with their tasks, even if the boss scolds him occasionally. But on the way back, the day's heavy workload leaves him completely exhausted. Still on his commute home, he decides to stop by a supermarket. After grabbing something to eat, he heads to the register. He is greeted by Yamada, who is warm and friendly, and her cheerful presence instantly brightens Sasaki's mood. After Yamada scans his loyalty card and checks out his groceries, he walks toward the exit. Looking down at the receipt, he sees her name printed on it and feels a surge of genuine happiness, realizing that seeing Yamada is the one comfort at the end of his long workday. Leaving the store, he catches himself making unnecessary purchases just to see her and wonders if he should buy her a small gift. However, he quickly dismisses the idea, not wanting to come across as a creep to someone so much younger than him. The next day, the boss calls Sasaki out, accusing him of wandering around the office instead of doing fieldwork. He demands that Sasaki keep him updated, warning that a lack of communication could cause serious problems for the company. Even though Sasaki apologizes, the boss keeps pressing, insisting that his communication skills are lacking. Right then, Suzuki steps in to interrupt, mentioning that Ada from the Shikaku company is on the line. The boss ignores the call for now, and tells Suzuki to get back to him tomorrow, since they need to schedule their own meeting for 10 a.m. that very day. On his commute back home, Sasaki is more exhausted than usual and starts cursing his boss in his head, calling him an absolute idiot. Worn out from staying late at the office because of the meeting, Sasaki reflects on how much Yamada's presence cheers him up, even if she's just a cashier he barely knows. Thinking about this, he decides to visit the market to see her, but when he gets to the checkout line, an older woman named Ono is working in her place instead, leaving Sasaki utterly disappointed. As he steps out of the supermarket, reality hits him that Yamada must be on her day off. Having no other choice, he decides to light up a cigarette to take the edge off. But when he notices two women staring at him with visible disgust, he sheepishly pulls the cigarette from his lips. He sets off to find a designated smoking area, but comes up empty, grumbling to himself that smokers have completely lost their human rights these days. Out of nowhere, a girl named Tayama starts waving him over, inviting him to share a smoke behind the supermarket. The offer leaves Sasaki flustered yet tempted, though he hesitates, worried about trespassing behind the store. He asks if they'll get into trouble for using the space, but Tayama brushes it off, saying no one cares and nobody can tell employees from regular customers anyway. Sasaki sits down beside her, quietly observing her tough, edgy style, thinking she doesn't look like a supermarket worker at all. Just as he asks which department she works in, she leans in way closer than expected, catching him off guard. Tayama explains that she just needed a lighter for her cigarette, which was the real reason she called him over in the first place. Blushing, Sasaki stammers that she should have just asked from the start, but Tayama smirks, admitting she just wanted to mess with him. Sasaki replies that she shouldn't play tricks on complete strangers. Tayama then asks if he isn't the guy who always comes through register 2. Sasaki tries to play it cool, claiming it's just a coincidence. But Tayama sees right through his act, instantly realizing he has a thing for Yamada, leaving Sasaki completely embarrassed at being exposed. Unexpectedly, Tayama turns out to be empathetic, agreeing that Yamada is indeed sweet and adorable, and even better, she's single, which keeps her admirers hopeful. Hearing this, Sasaki defends himself, admitting that even if he seems like a creepy older guy who frequents Yamada's line, he only goes there because he truly appreciates her customer service and feels reinvigorated by her friendly charm. After blurting it out, he apologizes for getting overly emotional. Tayama reveals she initially assumed Sasaki was just another creep, as Yamada gets plenty of obnoxious customers making inappropriate advances. However, Tayama tells him he's clearly different, encouraging him to keep being a model customer. Later on, back at the supermarket, Sasaki finds himself reflecting on the girl who smoked with him. He considers her bold, teasing nature with older men, but ultimately comes to the conclusion that she's a genuinely good person at heart, and genuinely cares about her coworkers. Standing in line, Yamada catches his attention. After scanning his items, she addresses him by name. Flustered, Sasaki asks how she knows who he is, and Yamada smiles, explaining that she noticed it on his loyalty card a while back. She adds that another employee, Tayama, told her he was a fan of hers. As he leaves the checkout line, Sasaki practically tears up from sheer embarrassment, swearing he'll never forget the name Tayama. Meanwhile, back at the register, Yamada softly whispers under her breath, hoping he'll visit the smoking spot more often, revealing that she was Tayama all along. On his walk home, Sasaki is left scratching his head, trying to figure out how Tayama, who was actually Yamada, knew his name in the first place. At the office, the staff are complaining about the boss scheduling yet another late-night meeting. Walking back from the smoking area, Sasaki ponders how exhausted everyone is from these endless late hours, yet Yamada's smile remains his daily comfort. After his shift, Sasaki heads back to the supermarket. Walking through the aisles, he worries she might not be working again today. But as he reaches the checkout, he finds her there and braces himself, expecting her to tease him about being her fan. Instead, Yamada simply greets him and rings up his groceries like normal, leaving Sasaki to ponder her earlier comment about Tayama. Leaving the market, he feels relieved and grateful that she's treating him normally after his embarrassing moment, feeling comfortable enough to keep shopping there in peace. The next day at work, Suzuki is stressed out because a client hasn't responded to his apology email. He worries that at this pace, he'll be working so much he won't even see his family. Grumbling about having to team up with Sasaki, Suzuki playfully calls him an old man, then asks why Sasaki is working overtime. Sasaki explains that he's redoing paperwork for a new hire, as it was a task way too complex for a beginner. Suzuki notes that the boss sees it differently. He prefers throwing rookies straight into the fire to force them to adapt to the company's pace. Suzuki adds that despite that philosophy, the boss never bothers to clean up the mess his sink-or-swim training creates. Hearing this, Sasaki feels bad for the rookie, who clearly poured his heart and soul into that report. But after that, he thinks of Yamada as his comfort, and in doing so, he accidentally deletes everything he had just fixed on the rookie's report. After working overtime, Sasaki is checked out by Ono instead of Yamada. Leaving the market, he starts arguing with himself, telling himself not to rely on others for comfort, and wonders if he should pick up a hobby. Suddenly, Tayama, who is actually Yamada, calls him over to the smoking spot again. As he approaches, Sasaki tells her they need to talk, explaining that it was mean of her to tell Yamada that he was a fan, admitting he dies of embarrassment every time he gets in her checkout line. Yamada points out that he still keeps choosing her line anyway. Still unaware that she is Yamada, Sasaki wonders where she even got that information. With that, Yamada apologizes for the trick, but then adds that Yamada was actually happy to hear it. Sasaki scoffs, saying he's not a kid who believes everything at face value. He then hands her a rice cracker snack as a thank you for letting him smoke there. Looking at the gift, Yamada comments that those crackers are a huge hit with older guys, making Sasaki uncomfortable for having the taste of an old man. She quickly adds that she'd been wanting to try them for a while, and invites him to sit next to her for a smoke. Hearing this, Sasaki brightens up, hoping she might actually have a soft spot for retro things. Yamada then reveals she hasn't eaten a thing all day, and now that her shift is over, she can finally eat. Hearing this, Sasaki advises her to eat right away so she doesn't go to sleep on an empty stomach. Reaching for his pack, he realizes he left his cigarettes back at the office. Noticing his predicament, Yamada offers him a drag of her own cigarette, and even though Sasaki feels like he's taking advantage, she insists. He then realizes she's only doing this so she can enjoy her snack without cigarette smoke in her face. Seeing how quickly he caught on to her ulterior motive, she starts teasing him, admitting that messing with Sasaki is basically her main source of comfort. Wrapping up their chat, she says goodbye, but asks him to drop by more often. The next day at the office, Suzuki greets Sasaki and notices a bag of rice crackers by the door. Sasaki asks if the apology to the client worked out, and Suzuki proudly says he managed to smooth things over, thanks to his top-tier apologizing skills. Changing the subject, Suzuki asks if Sasaki was the one who left the crackers there. Sasaki asks how he knew, and Suzuki reminds him of the times Sasaki used to force him to eat them, adding that once you start eating them, you just can't stop. Hearing that, Sasaki mentions that those crackers taste amazing with a drink, and tells Suzuki to take the whole batch home. Suzuki agrees, but asks how he ended up with so many. Sasaki explains that he keeps buying them every time he visits the market, completely forgetting he already has a stash at home, and they just pile up without him noticing. Hearing that, Suzuki tells him to stop buying them. Well, right at the end of the shift, Sasaki is about to buy yet another bag of rice crackers. Even though he remembers his coworker telling him to stop, he grabs one anyway. At the checkout, Yamada notices he always buys those specific crackers and seizes the opportunity to mention that she recently discovered them, explaining that she received some as a gift, tried them, and thought they were amazing. Walking out of the store, Sasaki assumes Yamada got the crackers from that girl Tayama, concluding the two must be really close friends. Afterward, Ono asks why Yamada is in such a cheerful mood, and Yamada replies that there's a slow-witted older guy out there thinking all about her, referring to Sasaki. Back at the office, while everyone is working away, Sasaki accidentally bangs his head on his keyboard from sheer exhaustion. Later on at the market, Yamada is scanning his items and notices his loyalty card is almost full. To try and cheer him up a bit more, she mentions that the rice crackers will be 50% off the very next day. But even after hearing that, he is so dead tired from lack of sleep that he can't muster a shred of the excitement he usually has. Suddenly, while she's still ringing him up, Ono walks up right behind her to announce it's time for a shift change. Chatting with the older woman, Yamada mentions she noticed Sasaki wasn't showing his usual happiness at the register. She felt like something was bothering him, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Outside, Sasaki thinks about having a smoke and immediately remembers Yamada asking him to show up more often, so he decides to head over to their usual spot. Reaching the smoking area, he looks around for Tayama, but realizes she isn't there. He starts second-guessing himself, wondering if it's right to smoke just because it's convenient for him in the moment. Out of nowhere, Yamada appears, taps him on the arm, and startles him. Realizing she just got off work, he puts the pieces together. Yamada simply gives him a gentle push to get him to light up already, as if she doesn't want to see him overthinking things. Catching his heavy sigh, Yamada asks if something bad happened. Hearing that, he replies that it was something like that, but decides not to go into too much detail. With that, Tayama mentions that Yamada was worried about him, making Sasaki realize he might have come across as rude to her. She explains that Yamada asked if he was alright, and showed genuine concern upon noticing he seemed off. Hearing this, Sasaki calls Yamada a wonderful and thoughtful worker, feeling grateful that she cared enough to worry. Moments later though, he notices that she probably didn't come all the way out there just to talk about that. Judging by how she appeared, it looked like she came running, especially since she hadn't even taken the time to tie up her hair. At that comment, she blows a puff of smoke right in his face, steps in closer, and leaves Sasaki thoroughly embarrassed. Yamada then excuses her hair, saying it's like that simply because she was feeling too lazy to fix it. But before Sasaki can press the issue, Yamada leans right up to his ear and whispers that she won't spill another word about it, since, in her eyes, he's not only full of himself but also pretty slow on the uptake. Afterward, Sasaki asks for her objective opinion, inquiring if he comes off as intimidating, since he accidentally made a new female hire at the office burst into tears. Though Yamada finds the question amusing, she assumes Sasaki must be the type to lose his temper on the job. He quickly sets the record straight, explaining that he only wanted to encourage her, but she completely misread his intentions, which got him chewed out by the boss. Sasaki frets that she'll end up hating her job because of him. Yamada doesn't see the big deal, pointing out that his company is clearly one of those soul-crushing sweatshops that works everyone to the bone, concluding the rookie was probably going to quit anyway. Still, she adds that since the girl is a new hire, there's always a chance she'll change her mind and realize he's actually a good guy. Besides, Yamada notes, first impressions can be deceiving, especially when you meet someone under high pressure, nerve-wracking circumstances. Sasaki continues to ponder the situation, feeling guilty for causing the misunderstanding despite his good intentions. Sasaki then muses that if it were Yamada, she would never scare anyone or make a rookie cry. Yamada replies about her alter ego as if they were two separate people, remarking that the Yamada at the register is indeed a sweet person who wouldn't hurt a fly, unlike herself, who doesn't exactly have the most welcoming look. At that, Sasaki begins to shower Yamada with compliments, saying he wishes he could smile like Yamada when dealing with clients. Seeing him get all earnest, Yamada breaks the tension by scoffing that the supermarket actually forces them to practice their customer smiles until their faces hurt, and with that, she demonstrates her own cheerful register smile right on the spot. Seeing it up close, Sasaki remarks that such a cute smile really suits her. Hearing this, Yamada suddenly grabs the corners of his mouth and tugs them upward, forcing him to smile despite his total confusion. After holding it for a few seconds, she lets go, declaring that his smile training is officially over. She then encourages him to try smiling on his own, telling him to remember how it felt when she moved his face. The next day at the office, the new female hire apologizes for crying over what Sasaki had said, confessing that she overreacted and accidentally made him out to be the villain. Even though she takes responsibility, Sasaki insists he should have been more careful with his phrasing, but she cuts him off, reassuring him that she knew all along he was a good guy. Hearing that, Sasaki remembers Yamada's prediction that the rookie would eventually realize he was one of the good ones. Sasaki gently tells her that making mistakes early on is completely normal, encouraging her not to get discouraged and letting her know she can ask him anything whenever she needs help. He reassures her that everyone goes through a period of self-doubt when starting out in a new place. After work, he heads straight to the market and feels his spirits lift even higher upon seeing Yamada's signature smile. As he walks out, he tries out his new smile on her. In that moment, Yamada remembers him saying that a cute smile suited her, though she silently thinks to herself that the exact same smile definitely does not suit him. Stepping out of a different convenience store, Sasaki sneezes and mutters that spring has finally arrived. He reflects on how he stepped out in just a light sweater to grab cigarettes, but even in spring, the nights are still freezing, making him consider finding an indoor spot to smoke. Meanwhile, back at the market during the shift change, Yamada notes to Ono that Sasaki hasn't shown up today, assuming he either got stuck working overtime or passed out at his desk. Before Yamada can log off, Ono mentions that the store manager wants to have a word with her. A short while later, Sasaki arrives at their usual smoking spot to look for Tayama, but instead finds Yamada standing there with a furious expression on her face. Before he can even ask if she's alright, Yamada asks if he had the day off today. When he confirms he did, he notices the pile of cigarette butts beside her and realizes she's chain smoking. Still, Yamada expresses relief that at least Sasaki got a chance to rest. Noticing a vending machine nearby, Sasaki decides to buy a hot drink, advising Yamada to get one too, pointing out that a warm drink will do her a lot more good than cigarettes and booze. That's when Yamada reveals that the manager just chewed her out, warning her that no matter how friendly and pleasant she is with customers, the smell of cigarette smoke ended up disappointing a customer. But at the same time, her boss tried to reassure her, saying it was just a customer being petty for no reason and that she shouldn't sweat it. Even so, Yamada admits that in moments like this, you can't help but feel a little foolish. At that, Sasaki gently offers that even if someone sees another side of you and forgets the side they originally knew, both sides are still a part of who you are. Right after saying it, he apologizes, thinking he might be overstepping, and then sneezes, apologizing again for that too since he's dressed so lightly. However, Yamada takes off her own jacket and hands it over to him. Snug in the jacket, Sasaki thanks her, saying how warm it is. The two then chat about how neither of them drinks coffee, and Sasaki offers to go buy them some juice instead. The next morning, Sasaki is in a great mood on his way to work, enjoying the pleasant spring weather despite having gotten chewed out by a client earlier. He tells himself he needs to get straight to work, but considers stopping by Yamada's supermarket first. Walking past the smoking area, he thinks Tayama might be on the night shift and probably isn't there, but decides to check anyway, only to run right into Yamada, which leaves him completely flustered. He asks if she works day shifts too, and Yamada tells him to relax, explaining that while she usually works nights, she's covering a midday shift because someone called in sick. Once Sasaki calms down, Yamada discreetly hides her cigarettes. She then asks if he's getting off work early, but Sasaki explains he's actually heading into work and had hoped to share a smoke with Tayama if she happened to be around. He quickly apologizes, realizing he shouldn't be hanging around a staff-only area when he doesn't work there, blaming himself for taking advantage of Tayama's kindness. But Yamada tells him it's fine, claiming she knows all about it because Tayama told her everything. Sasaki takes this as proof that the two must be best friends. Under her breath, Yamada mutters that he's a total slow sake, since he still hasn't pieced together that Yamada and Tayama are the exact same person. Sasaki goes on to say that the two of them have a lot in common, as both are so thoughtful, and takes the chance to ask if Tayama is doing okay. Yamada realizes he's asking about the manager's reprimand, and Sasaki confirms it, saying he heard about it from Tayama herself and was worried about her. Yamada reassures him that she's fine, sharing that even though Tayama was upset at first, she ate a hot bowl of ramen, slept it off, and completely forgot all about it. Hearing that, Yamada asks him to reach out and talk to her again, but Sasaki thinks she has probably gotten over it on her own, and that bringing it up again would just be annoying. However, Yamada reassures him it doesn't have to be strictly about that, adding that she'll be sure to pass along his concern to Tayama. Sasaki hesitates, worrying he'd be sticking his nose where it doesn't belong, but Yamada settles his mind, saying it's hardly overstepping when Tayama was the one who told him in the first place. With that, Sasaki thanks Yamada for checking on him when he was feeling down, admitting he never found the right moment to express his gratitude. He adds that her concern meant a lot, as he was going through a tough patch at work. Yamada hopes she wasn't meddling, but Sasaki reassures her that wasn't the case at all. He then apologizes for holding her up for so long, but she tells him it's completely fine, saying she wanted to chat with him just like Tayama did, and that doing so made her really happy. Yamada then tells Sasaki he's welcome to smoke there even if Tayama isn't around. Hearing that, he decides it's best to take his leave, worrying the cigarette smoke might cling to her and get her into trouble at work. But before he can step away, Yamada leans in and plucks a cherry blossom petal caught in his hair, chuckling that it had been stuck there for a while, but she held off on taking it out because she thought it looked cute. Sasaki is left speechless, completely unprepared for her to have noticed such a small detail the whole time. Walking to work, he begins to realize that Yamada has a surprisingly playful side. Meanwhile, Yamada finds herself thinking about him too, finding the way he reacts to things endearing and his sheer cluelessness genuinely fascinating. Later at the supermarket, as Yamada rings up Sasaki's items at the register, she notices a few personal hygiene products among his groceries, specifically a deodorant. Sasaki looks like he wants to say something to her, but remembering she's currently on the clock, he decides it's not the right time and holds his tongue. Yamada watches the interaction, her mind racing to connect the dots. After all, Sasaki had previously mentioned how cigarette smoke was causing issues at his office, and now here he is, buying hygiene products out of nowhere. On top of that, he clearly hesitated to ask her something. Putting all the pieces together, Yamada comes to a solid conclusion about what must have happened. Later on, she catches up with Sasaki and directly asks if his boss had been complaining about him smelling like cigarettes. Sasaki is caught completely off guard and asks if she's some kind of psychic. Yamada chuckles and explains she simply figured it out from the items he bought. Sasaki admits that his boss really despises the smell of cigarettes and gave him an earful about taking care of it, concluding that dealing with complaints like that is just the inevitable fate of any smoker in an office environment. Yamada recommends that Sasaki brush his teeth right after smoking to kill the smell, adding that a quick spritz of fabric spray on his clothes will keep the odor from bothering anyone nearby. Hearing this, Sasaki is blown away by how knowledgeable she is, but Yamada brushes it off, explaining she's just repeating what the veteran employees taught her. Sasaki notes that even if she's just passing on advice, right now, she's the one teaching him. Suddenly, Yamada playfully asks him to give her his paw. Confused, Sasaki actually reaches out his hand, only to realize he just fell for her trick like a well-trained pup, leaving him completely flustered. Yamada then hands him a bottle of deodorant spray, the very one she uses. Noticing it looks pretty high-end, Sasaki hesitates to accept such an expensive gift, but Yamada reassures him that she has a spare at home and insists he take it. She explains that the scent is subtle enough to pass office inspection without bothering anyone. Curious, Sasaki wonders aloud what the spray actually smells like, to which Yamada playfully replies that he could just sniff her neck to find out. Blushing hard at the suggestion, Sasaki freezes, making Yamada laugh and comment that she thought he'd go along with the mood. Sasaki sputters, asking if she really thinks he's some kind of dog to follow orders like that. Yamada just smiles and says he actually reminds her a lot of a golden retriever. The next day at the office, after a quick smoke break with a few coworkers, Sasaki heads to the restroom to clean up before getting back to work. He brushes his teeth and pulls out the spray Yamada gave him, but hesitates, wondering how many sprays count as the right amount. After all, with regular air freshener, he usually just gives it a quick spritz. Right on cue, Suzuki walks into the restroom and grumbles that the boss's version of a morning greeting to the smokers is always a lecture about how bad they smell. As he says this, Suzuki observes Sasaki's thorough routine and remarks that he's way too meticulous. Sasaki explains that he learned that brushing his teeth and using spray right after a smoke helps eliminate the odor completely. Curious, Suzuki asks who taught him that trick. Instead of answering, Sasaki aims the spray at Suzuki and gives him a quick spritz. Suzuki immediately yelps, complaining that the spray is freezing cold, caught completely off guard by the icy blast. Sasaki just chuckles, noting that the scent is fantastic, and teases that Suzuki's wife might fall even more in love with him if he wears such a pleasant fragrance. Hearing this, Suzuki proudly shoots back that Keiko is already head over heels for him and doesn't need any more impressing. Even so, he admits it wouldn't hurt to polish up his look and take a bit more care of his appearance. After work, Sasaki heads over to the supermarket. As Yamada rings up his groceries, she immediately catches the scent and realizes he's wearing the spray she gave him. With a smirk, she remarks that he smells exactly like Tayama, a comment that freezes Sasaki dead in his tracks. Blushing furiously, he worries he went overboard with the spray before leaving the house. Flustered and unsure how to handle the sudden comment, Sasaki stammers out a quick thank you for checking out his items and makes a swift exit. As soon as he leaves, Ono walks up to let Yamada know her shift is almost over. Noticing the look on her face, Ono asks what's wrong, pointing out that Yamada seems a little flushed after that chat with Sasaki. In a quiet voice, Yamada confesses that she only intended to tease Sasaki and get a reaction out of him, but the tables turned, leaving her feeling just as embarrassed. The next day, Sasaki powers through his workday without a single complaint from the boss, feeling hugely relieved that his cigarette smell is no longer an issue. After his shift, he stops by the mall to pick out a thank you gift for Yamada for helping him solve his odor problem. On his way to the smoking spot, he reflects on how awesome Tayama is, hoping she'll like the thoughtful gift he picked out. But when he arrives, he runs right into the store manager, a woman named Goto. Mistaking her for just another regular employee, Sasaki is stunned, having fully expected to find Tayama waiting there instead. The moment Goto spots Sasaki, she demands to know who he is, playfully teasing him by threatening to call the cops on a suspicious-looking old guy. Sasaki explains that he was looking for Tayama, whom he met while searching for a smoking area, admitting that he's been taking advantage of her hospitality ever since. However, Goto says she doesn't know anyone by that name, though she suddenly remembers seeing Sasaki frequently in Yamada's checkout line, mentioning that he reminds her of a little dog her parents own. She then asks who this Tayama could possibly be, guessing that her real name might actually be Yamada. Sasaki describes her as a cool, edgy girl wearing a stylish jacket who happens to be close friends with Yamada. Hearing this, Goto instantly realizes that Yamada is just pulling his leg. Sasaki then explains that he wanted to hand over a gift for Tayama, but Goto suspects this mysterious girl might be pulling a scam on him to get free stuff. Sasaki sets the record straight, clarifying that it's simply a token of appreciation. Goto then fibs that Tayama is finishing her shift soon and offers to call her over, but Sasaki politely declines, asking Goto to pass the gift along for him instead. Apologizing for interrupting her break, Sasaki takes his leave. Moments later, Yamada arrives at the smoking spot to join her manager for a smoke. Yamada immediately complains about Goto not inviting her to smoke earlier, but Goto cuts her off with a stern lecture, scolding her for bringing customers to smoke in an off-limits area without permission. Before Yamada can cook up an excuse, Goto reveals she heard the whole story straight from Sasaki, who just left. She mentions she almost called the cops on him, thinking he was a suspicious trespasser. Goto then hands over Sasaki's thank you gift to Yamada, warning her not to mess with a genuinely sweet older guy like Sasaki. Suddenly, Goto catches the happy expression on Yamada's face over Sasaki's thoughtful gesture, instantly piecing together that Yamada must actually have feelings for him. The next day, Sasaki is smoking on the company rooftop, worrying if Tayama got into trouble because of him. Meanwhile, Goto is sitting in her car reading a romance manga when Yamada suddenly appears at the window. Goto asks if she wasn't scheduled for the night shift, and Yamada explains that supervisor Maezawa was struggling with the roster, so she volunteered to step in and help out. Yamada then asks why Goto switched away from traditional cigarettes, to which Goto replies that vapes are much more socially acceptable, complaining that brushing your teeth all the time is a total hassle. However, Goto sees right through Yamada's small talk, noticing she's beating around the bush. Yamada finally asks if Goto ever gave her explicit permission to keep smoking back there. Hearing this, Goto realizes it's all about Sasaki. Pointing out that Yamada wasn't listening yesterday, Goto reminds her that she only warned her not to go overboard. Goto explains she's turning a blind eye since the timing doesn't disrupt anyone's work, but warns that if Yamada pushes her luck, she will have to step in. After work, Sasaki lingers outside the smoking spot, debating whether to apologize to Tayama for causing her trouble when he only meant to leave a thank you gift. Suddenly, Tayama shows up and asks what he's doing there. Sasaki explains he stopped by earlier and bumped into another employee. When Tayama tells him that was actually the store manager, Sasaki panics, but Tayama reassures him that nothing bad happened. Still anxious, he asks if they're still allowed to smoke there, and Tayama confirms the manager gave them the green light, provided they keep it in moderation. Sitting down together, Tayama holds up the gift Sasaki gave her and says she thought it was super cute, bringing a relieved smile to Sasaki's face. He admits he made a point of thanking her, even though she had told him not to worry about it. Tayama then confesses that she can't help but smile every time she looks at the gift, picturing Sasaki picking it out at the store. Sasaki looks confused and asks why that would make her so happy. Tayama points out that finding a cute keychain like that must have been a real ordeal, since items like that aren't easy to come by. She imagines Sasaki awkwardly asking the store clerks for help while wandering around the novelty department, a place packed with women feeling completely out of place, yet powering through just to pick out the perfect one for her. Sasaki grunts that she's just getting a kick out of making fun of an old guy, but Tayama insists that's not it at all. If anything, it actually brightens her day. Even though Sasaki suspects she might still be pulling his leg, Tayama sincerely thanks him for the present, promising to cherish it. Reminding him to flick his ashes, she glances down at the keychain, noting its built-in ash receiver feature. Leaning in way too close, she leaves Sasaki totally flustered before playfully nudging the ashtray just out of his reach. Stretching his arm to reach it, Sasaki gets a sudden cramp and lets out a painful yell. Well, a few days later at the market, Yamada notices Sasaki buying muscle relief patches for his shoulder and accidentally bursts out laughing. Realizing she laughed a little too loud, she immediately apologizes, but Sasaki reassures her there's no need. Later on, as Sasaki calmly reads the newspaper, Suzuki watches him and remarks that he's acting like a total old-timer, especially by pulling out a physical paper and sliding on reading glasses at the same time. Hearing that, Sasaki is left wondering if he really gives off as much of an old man vibe as Suzuki keeps making him out to. Suzuki explains that nowadays you can read pretty much anything on a smartphone, warning that if Sasaki can't even navigate a modern phone, things are going to get tough for him. After all, technology has advanced rapidly over the past few years, with more and more people using these devices to handle everyday tasks that used to be done manually. On top of that, Suzuki points out that even news and newspapers can be followed right from a screen, without needing to buy a physical copy every single day. Hearing this, Sasaki realizes he might be falling behind on modern technology, though he still remains a bit stubborn about abandoning the habits he's comfortable with. He insists on sticking with his current phone, arguing that since it isn't broken and still works just fine, there's no reason to replace something that does its job. But right as he tries to use it again, the the phone completely dies and refuses to turn back on. Facing reality, Sasaki thinks about taking it in for repairs, but Suzuki quickly chimes in, saying nobody in their right mind would fix a phone that ancient nowadays, advising him to throw in the towel and just buy a new smartphone. On his way home, Sasaki fiddles with his brand new smartphone, recalling that he can read the news on it. However, he panics when he stumbles upon headlines about personal data leaks, credit card fraud, and viruses. Reading all of that frightens him, leaving him feeling utterly helpless. In his panic, he accidentally opens the camera and inadvertently snaps a selfie of his own flustered face. Arriving at the smoking spot to meet Tayama, Sasaki desperately begs her to teach him how to use a smartphone. Hearing his plea, Tayama asks which specific part of the phone he's struggling with, to which Sasaki admits he doesn't even know how to handle the most basic functions. Hearing that, Tayama stares at him in silence for a few seconds, stunned by his complete lack of tech savviness with something so ordinary. Even so, she agrees to help, promising to give him a quick crash course on the essential features he'll actually use day to day. But when she discovers he doesn't even know how to navigate back to the home screen, her patience immediately starts wearing thin, though she presses on anyway. When Sasaki mentions wanting to read the paper on his phone, Tayama explains that he'll first need to download the newspaper's app from the App Store. She begins detailing the process, noting that Sasaki will first have to create a user account just to install the app, and then set up another separate account inside the app itself to access all the available features. But as Tayama walks him through each step, Sasaki gets progressively more lost. After all, for someone still trying to figure out the bare minimum, creating multiple accounts and following a series of technical steps just to read a simple article feels completely overwhelming. That explanation alone is enough to leave Sasaki utterly confused, his brain short-circuiting as he realizes that using a smartphone is way more complicated than he ever imagined. After spending some time teaching him the ropes, Sasaki brightens up, confidently declaring that he'll soon be using this smartphone just like his old phone. Tayama shrugs, telling him it's just a matter of playing around with it until he gets used to it. However, Sasaki then asks her if she can make the font size bigger. That request earns him a look of pure disdain from Tayama, who asks how on earth he knows nothing about smartphones, yet somehow knows you can adjust the text size. Sasaki explains that his old phone had that feature, so he assumed this one would too, even if activating it seems like a complex task for a boomer like him. Hearing that, Tayama simply turns her back on him to take another drag, muttering that changing the font size isn't rocket science, so she might as well do it for him. As she adjusts his settings, she casually suggests adding Yamada's phone number to his contacts as a way to celebrate his new device. Hearing this, Sasaki instantly panics, exclaiming that her number is private personal data. Seeing him completely shocked, Tayama smirks, admitting she was only messing with him as she finishes adjusting the text size. The next day, Yamada and Ono wish each other a good shift before starting work. Afterward, Yamada settles in and decides to check the work schedule on her phone to plan out her day. But as she scrolls through her device, she stumbles upon the photo she took of Sasaki earlier. Seeing the picture, Yamada pauses in surprise, amused by the fact that Sasaki didn't even notice when the snapshot was taken. She finds the whole thing adorable, chuckling at how completely oblivious he was to his surroundings. Even though it's just a silly photo, the moment fondly reminds Yamada of Sasaki's innocent, spacey nature. The following day, right in the middle of their shift, Suzuki casually remarks that you can tell everything about a person's personality just by looking at the brand of cigarettes they usually smoke. According to him, every brand carries distinct traits that reflect the smoker's personality. With that, Suzuki pulls out his phone to show off his test results, though he conspicuously reads only the flattering parts, proudly highlighting that he's branded as loyal and deeply focused. Catching on, Sasaki points out that the test also includes a negative breakdown, which notes that Suzuki lacks situational awareness and struggles to read the room. Irritated, Suzuki snaps back that Sasaki shouldn't dwell on useless minor details, insisting it's much better to focus strictly on his positive traits. Well, as night falls, Sasaki catches up with Tayama again and brings up the whole cigarette personality test. Tayama admits she's heard of the trend and gets curious about Sasaki's results, asking him to read his diagnosis aloud. Scrolling down, Sasaki stumbles across a bizarre entry asserting that he has strong masochistic tendencies. Baffled, he has no idea how a simple smoking test arrived at such an oddly specific conclusion. Eager to shift the spotlight, he asks Tayama to share her results instead. Tayama casually reveals that her test pegged her as having a split personality alongside a high sex drive. Hearing that, Sasaki immediately freezes up and apologizes, completely taken aback by how blunt and surprisingly inappropriate the results turned out to be. However, Tayama takes it in stride, realizing he was just trying to spark a fun conversation to pass the time and got caught off guard by the test's wild claims. Hearing her take it so well, Sasaki notes that at the very least, The split personality part seems spot on for her, since he's noticed she acts completely differently depending on the situation. Hearing this, Tayama instantly tenses up, panicking that he's finally pieced together that she and Yamada are the exact same person. But to her relief and mild annoyance, Sasaki simply clarifies that she can be super sweet one moment and completely distant the next, remaining utterly oblivious to her dual identity. Realizing he's just as hopelessly dense as ever, Tayama gets annoyed at the false alarm and aggressively shoves her cigarette right into his mouth, forcing a flustered Sasaki to apologize yet again. Well, the following day, Sasaki visits a client's home to discuss a new business proposal. Once they sit down, Sasaki takes a sip of the tea that instantly restores all his energy. At that moment, the client brings up Sasaki's proposal, mentioning that it helped his business immensely. Hearing a news broadcast on TV talking about the upcoming summer, the client notes that they're already gearing up for the season. Sasaki takes the opportunity to vent about his own workplace, complaining that employees aren't allowed to take off their suit jackets until summer officially arrives. Stepping out of the client's home, Sasaki realizes how scorching hot it feels even before summer has fully kicked in. Dreading how miserable he'll be once the heat really sets in, he decides to stop by the market to buy an ice cream before heading home. But the second he walks inside, he finds himself completely dazzled by Yamada in her short-sleeved summer uniform. He thinks to himself that he doesn't even need to buy ice cream anymore, as just seeing Yamada in her summer outfit is refreshing enough to carry him through the rest of the day. Well, the very next evening at the smoking spot, Tayama calls Sasaki out for walking out of the store without buying anything the day before. Before he can pull together a convincing excuse, Tayama starts teasing him, guessing that his heat stroke magically vanished the second he laid eyes on Yamada in short sleeves. Caught red-handed, Sasaki gets startled by her sharp intuition, but stammers out a weak denial, insisting it's not what she thinks. Yet within seconds, Tayama manages to pry out the truth, getting Sasaki to admit that he finds Yamada adorable in her summer clothes. Trying to shift the focus, Sasaki asks if Tayama isn't suffocating in that heavy jacket of hers. She shrugs, explaining that she wears lightweight clothes underneath to balance out the coat. With that, she zips it open to reveal a crop top that leaves her midriff completely exposed. But instead of showering her with compliments, Sasaki just scolds her, warning that she's going to catch a chill in her stomach. Irritated once again by his dense, paternal reaction, Tayama snaps at his obliviousness. Sasaki, ever the gentleman, offers her his own jacket so she won't freeze. She accepts it, but walks off while calling him a four-arm guy, a phrase that leaves him completely baffled. Back at her apartment, Yamada reflects on the interaction, concluding that Sasaki apparently prefers forearms to midriffs, deciding she should probably cut back on the ramen for a while. Meanwhile, as everyone else grumbles about the blistering heat outside the office, Suzuki, lounging safely indoors, starts bragging that unlike the rest of the crew, he gets to enjoy a fully air-conditioned room. He boasts that the outrageous heat wave won't affect him one bit, smugly teasing his suffering coworkers who are sweltering in the heat. However, right when Suzuki thinks he's got it so much better than everyone else, he makes a dreadful discovery. The air conditioner in the room is actually broken. He completely loses his mind and starts raging about the situation, ranting that it must be a full-blown conspiracy cooked up by the boss himself just to torture the staff. According to Suzuki, it wouldn't be above someone to have deliberately stuffed something inside the unit just to keep them from using the AC during work hours. The more he dwells on it, the more convinced he becomes that there's a sinister plot behind the malfunction. Meanwhile, Sasaki stands right beside him, trying his best to tune out the endless whining, until he finally snaps and tells Suzuki to stop shouting. After all, throwing a massive tantrum isn't going to fix anything. If anything, it's just making him sweat even more. Seeing that Suzuki has no intention of piping down anytime soon, Sasaki tries to settle him down, assuring him that the air conditioner will probably be back up and running by tomorrow. Hearing this, Suzuki instantly grows suspicious, demanding to know how he can possibly be so sure about that. Sasaki explains that it's just an educated guess on his part, though he insists he truly believes things will turn out that way. Suzuki remains skeptical, warning Sasaki that if the AC isn't fixed by tomorrow like he claims, Sasaki will be the one answering for it. Facing that ridiculous threat, Sasaki simply tells him to take a breath and wait for tomorrow, assuring him that a much cooler future is right around the corner for all of them. Suzuki still doesn't fully buy it, but decides to hold out and see if that prediction actually pans out. Well, a little later, Sasaki heads back to his usual smoking spot with Tayama, looking forward to a quiet moment to catch up. But the second he steps into the area, he gets blasted by a wall of water. It turns out Goto was hosing down the spot after a delivery truck spilled milk all over the pavement. Taking the sudden drenching in stride, Sasaki doesn't blame Goto for the mishap, gently noting that it's easy to get distracted on the job sometimes. He strips off his soaked clothes and tries to tidy things up, while Goto goes off to fetch a spare set of clothes so he doesn't have to freeze in wet rags. Afterward, Sasaki profusely apologizes for causing her extra trouble, but Goto quickly reminds him that she was the one who ended up soaking. him during the cleanup. So, as far as she's concerned, it's only fair that it falls on her to fix her mistake and supply him with a fresh set of clothes. Goto adds that there's no need for them to stand on ceremony with each other, especially since they're practically the same age. Sasaki is taken aback by this, amazed that someone from his own generation is already managing a bustling supermarket like this one. Noticing how easily impressed he gets whenever age comes up, Goto casually asks him what his reaction was when he found out how old Tayama was. Sasaki admits that he actually never got around to asking her age. Hearing that, Goto expresses surprise at his complete lack of curiosity about the people around him. Sasaki clarifies that just listening to whatever Tayama wants to share is more than enough for him, so he never felt the need to pry into her personal life. Observing him sink into thought for a moment, Goto misinterprets his silence, teasingly deduction that he must be privately reflecting on how much he likes Tayama. However, the moment she jumps to that conclusion, Sasaki hastily cuts in, insisting that nothing of the sort was crossing his mind. Goto shifts gears and asks if that means he actually dislikes Tayama. Sasaki denies that too, explaining that he genuinely likes her and enjoys the way she talks with him. But right at that exact second, Tayama walks into the area and catches that last sentence loud and clear. Realizing they were talking about her, Tayama freezes in surprise, finding it odd that Sasaki would say something like that out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Goto just smirks at the scene for a brief moment before slipping away, leaving Sasaki stranded and completely at a loss for how to handle the awkward situation. Left alone with Sasaki, Tayama remarks that he really got soaked. He explains that he had a little mishap the moment he arrived. With that, both of them light up their cigarettes and fall back into their usual routine. Sasaki then tentatively asks if she caught what they were talking about just now. Seeing him visibly anxious over what she might have overheard, Tayama turns the question back on him, asking what they were talking about. Sasaki freezes, thoroughly embarrassed, and quickly tries to brush it off, claiming he was just shooting the breeze with the manager, nothing important, and certainly nothing for her to worry about. As he keeps rambling on, Tayama steps in and starts drying his hair with a towel, scolding him for not even bothering to dry himself off properly. Out of nowhere, she blurted out the number 24, revealing her actual age. But without offering another word of explanation, she leaves Sasaki even more bewildered than before. The next day, Sasaki once again finds himself saddled with responsibilities that shouldn't fall on his shoulders, yet he accepts the extra workload without complaint. Suzuki watches from afar, remarking that Sasaki is practically carrying the entire company on his back. Suzuki admits he can't fathom how his colleague manages to function normally with endless problems piling up all at once. Sasaki simply replies that it's just part of his routine now, noting that complaining won't make the work disappear. Throughout the workday, a stream of coworkers keeps dropping by his desk asking for help, making Sasaki realize that Ito's absence has impacted far more people than he initially thought. On top of critical documents, several other key duties have ground to a halt, leaving everyone scrambling to find a way out of the bottleneck. Even under pressure, Sasaki keeps methodically organizing tasks and helping his teammates whenever possible. Deep down, however, the heavy toll of always being everyone's go-to problem solver begins to weigh on him. By the end of the day, just when he thinks he can finally take a breather, Sasaki notices a mountain of pending tasks still waiting for him. He lets out a weary sigh, bracing himself for another relentless lineup of office headaches tomorrow. Over the following days, Sasaki sticks to his relentless routine, waking up at the exact same hour every morning and heading back to the office for another exhausting shift. He pushes forward as if nothing out of the ordinary were happening, having long accepted this as his way of coping with daily pressure. After several days of pushing through the chaos, the boss finally returns from his trip. But instead of thanking the staff for stepping up during his absence, he simply dumps another pile of work on their desks. He orders them to organize a set of client appreciation gifts to be delivered to the company's major accounts. Hearing the request, the team is left utterly speechless, fully aware of how much they suffered while their boss was out enjoying a peaceful trip. Still, no one dares to call him out directly, conditioned as they are to his selfish habits. Seeing their stunned silence, the boss notices the awkward tension hanging over the room and barks at everyone to stop slacking off, lecturing them to stay productive even on tough, stormy days like this. To the exhausted staff, however, his speech only makes the situation all the more infuriating. Well, after finally getting to leave the office, Sasaki walks down the street as heavy rain continues to pour over the city. He feels an overwhelming sense of relief, having finally survived a brutal 14-day streak of non-stop work. At the same time, the torrential downpour gives the evening a slightly dreary vibe. Still, he pushes forward until he reaches his usual spot to meet Tayama. Arriving there, Sasaki catches her fiddling with a few rain-dispelling dolls. Seeing them brings back a wave of nostalgia, reminding him of how simple moments can become so special amid a grueling routine. Tayama shows off the face she drew on one of the dolls, but the moment Sasaki looks at it, he can't help but burst out laughing. Noticing his reaction, she hands him a blank doll and challenges him to draw one too. Sasaki takes it and crafts an amazingly detailed portrait of Tayama, catching her completely off guard. Impressed by the result, she decides to return the favor and starts drawing something for him. As the two keep hanging out in that quiet space, framed by the falling rain, the atmosphere feels a world away from the chaotic rush Sasaki faces every day at work. Sasaki remarks that he actually enjoys rainy days, noting how the cigarette smoke seems to drift differently in the damp air, making even the flavor taste distinct. But as he talks, he reflects on how his job had been draining so much of his energy that simple moments like this were almost fading from his memory. As they keep chatting, the heavy exhaustion from the past 2 weeks finally catches up with him. Slowly, Sasaki's eyes flutter shut, and he drifts off without even realizing it. When he finally wakes up, it's already the next morning. Roused by his 6:30 a.m. alarm, coming to his senses, he spots a little drawing on his hand wishing him good job on all his hard work. Though he has no idea when she drew it, Sasaki is deeply touched by the small gesture as he gets ready for the day. Afterward, he steps out onto his balcony to light a cigarette and kick off another morning. Meanwhile, Yamada whips up a bowl of ramen and says grace before digging in. Out of nowhere, Goto pops up and reminds her that Yamada herself had previously said that she was going to take a break from eating ramen. Hearing that, Yamada freezes on the spot, realizing she's just been called out on a promise she made to herself. So, despite trying to stick to her regular habits, Goto confronts her over her choice to keep indulging in her absolute favorite dish. Yamada quickly defends herself, promising she'll burn off the extra calories by working extra hard. However, Goto shuts that down, letting her know she won't even get the chance, since she's getting sent home early due to the store being slow that day. Well, as she strolls through the supermarket, Yamada bumps right into Sasaki and briefly considers sneaking up behind him to give him a scare. Instead, she simply calls out to bid him good evening, wearing the casual clothes she usually lounge around in at home. Seeing her out of uniform and in street clothes completely catches Sasaki off guard, causing him to drop his shopping basket right onto the floor. As they chat, Sasaki shares a little ritual he does with his cigarette packs, explaining how each individual cigarette represents a different good omen. Having explained his superstitious routine, he bids her goodnight and walks out. But halfway down the street, he realizes he accidentally carried off one of the store's magazines without paying for it. Panicking, Sasaki rushes right back to return the item. Seeing him dash back in with unpaid merchandise, Goto eyes him suspiciously, playfully warning him not to go shoplifting from her store, while a thoroughly embarrassed Sasaki endlessly apologizes for the mix-up. The next day, Sasaki stares anxiously at his routine health checkup results, knowing all too well that once you reach a certain age, all sorts of health scares start popping up. He worries the test might reveal some unpleasant surprises, especially given the relentless grind of his daily routine. After all, between lack of sleep, intense work stress, and a few unhealthier habits, he knows his body is bound to demand its toll eventually. As for Suzuki, he complains that his results showed high uric acid and elevated triglycerides. Hearing this, Sasaki offers his deep sympathies, noting that working in sales makes it practically impossible to escape some form of work-induced ailment. Yet despite the bad numbers, Suzuki doesn't seem nearly as bothered as before. He proudly mentions that he's slowly turning things around, sharing that ever since last year's checkup, Keiko has been packing him healthy home-cooked lunches every day. Hearing that, Sasaki admires how loving Suzuki's partner is, seeing how genuinely she cares for his well-being. Suzuki adds that to repay her love, he vows to completely quit drinking and smoking until his next annual checkup. Seeing that his buddy is even willing to give up smoking, Sasaki assumes he's exaggerating a bit, knowing just how much Suzuki enjoys his vices. But Suzuki explains he isn't doing it just for the exam, but because he genuinely wants to live a long, healthy life alongside Keiko. To make that happen, he realizes some lifestyle changes are non-negotiable. Well, upon leaving work, Sasaki stops by the usual market and takes his groceries to Yamada's register. Handing over his receipt, she offers him a discount coupon for one of their beers. However, he politely declines, explaining that he has a medical checkup coming up and needs to lay off the alcohol for a while. Yamada finds this surprising, as she didn't expect Sasaki to pass up a discount on drinks. Still, she notices he's trying to take better care of his health, even if he still clings to some of his old habits. Well, once night falls, Sasaki goes to share a smoke with Tayama, who immediately scolds him for smoking right before his health exam. Hearing this, he gets confused and wonders how she found out, only to quickly realize Yamada must have mentioned it to her. As for her reprimand, Sasaki insists he's been smoking significantly less than usual. Tayama smirks, guessing he's probably cut down by 2 cigarettes at most, pointing out that it hardly qualifies as a major lifestyle change. Sasaki then asks if the supermarket staff also have to undergo routine health checkups. Tayama confirms they do, explaining that she also gets ready for her exam days because she wants to keep her body in peak condition for work. Sasaki expresses genuine admiration for her discipline, admitting that unlike her, he still can't resist lighting up even with his exam right around the corner. He notes how she manages to maintain a much more organized routine while he continues to struggle with his old vices. Turning the focus back on him, Tayama notices he bought way more food than usual that day and asks him why. Sasaki is caught off guard that she picked up on such a subtle detail, amazed that anyone would pay such close attention to his shopping habits. Sasaki explains that his doctor actually advised him to put on a bit of weight. Hearing this, Tayama lightly pokes his ribs, confirming that he really is skin and bones. She suggests he buy more of the pre-made meals from her supermarket, noting that their hearty portions will definitely help him bulk up. Well, the very next day, Suzuki is ecstatically celebrating the fact that his uric acid levels and his triglycerides turned out completely normal, meaning he passed with flying colors in that department. But to balance things out, Suzuki notices he gained some weight compared to last year. Deciding to ignore that minor detail, he heads up to the rooftop for a smoke. Well, after wrapping up work, Sasaki visits Tayama, who asks him how his health checkup went. Judging by the look on Sasaki's face, Tayama assumes he had another run-in with his trashy boss. But contrary to her guess, Sasaki explains the problem is actually with his own body. He admits he started thinking about how bad smoking is for his health, so he decided to quit. Later on, Yamada brings up the topic with Goto, looking visibly down as she mentions that Sasaki is quitting. After all, if he stops smoking, he won't have any reason left to hang out and chat with her every night, meaning their secret late-night meetups will come to an end. But later that night, she spots him passing by and decides to drag him over to their usual spot. Once there, Sasaki places an unlit cigarette between his lips just to get the feeling of smoking, leaving Tayama as the only one actually lighting up. During their chat, Sasaki remarks that they might not get many more chances to talk like this. Hearing that, Yamada almost lets it slip that she's actually the girl from Register 2 he talks to every time he visits the market. But before she can finish her sentence, Sasaki's phone suddenly rings out of nowhere. As soon as he hangs up, a relieved Sasaki explains that there was a misdiagnosis. His internal organs are actually in top shape for someone his age. Reassured, he says they can keep smoking together after all. Even though it's good news, an annoyed Tayama starts swatting at him, warning him she won't forgive him if he ever pulls another false alarm. While Yamada practices her customer smile in front of the mirror, Ono walks over and compliments her on her dedication. Out of nowhere, Goto interrupts their chat to remind Yamada of when she first joined the company, back when she couldn't even manage a proper smile. Recalling those early days, Yamada apologizes for the complaints filed against her at the store, but Goto makes it clear that there's only one customer making those claims, pointing out that he's just looking for excuses to badmouth the business anyway, so his opinion doesn't count. Goto promises to take care of the issue and help refine Yamada's customer service skills, encouraging her to keep giving it her best. The next day, that same difficult customer arrives at Yamada's register and immediately starts throwing fault with everything, assuming that all the other employees must be just like her. Surrounding shoppers notice the guy taking things way too far, prompting Ono to rush over to Goto to report what's happening. Meanwhile, Sasaki steps right into the middle of the argument, pointing out that even if the guy had a point about certain things, he suddenly started complaining about stuff that made no sense at all. On top of that, Sasaki reminds him that he screams at Yamada every single time he passes through her line, which is completely out of line. Sasaki suggests he cut it out, noting there are empty registers right nearby he could easily use instead. Summing it all up, Sasaki calls him out, guessing the guy only goes to Yamada's register for the sole purpose of mistreating her. To make matters worse, Sasaki complains about the guy throwing a tantrum right when he happens to be next in line. Suddenly, amidst all the chaos, the store manager steps in to call the customer aside for a private chat. Goto tells Yamada to swap places with Ono, and Ono takes the chance to tell Yamada to go take a quick breather. Hearing that, Yamada feels a bit down, but agrees to step away. On her way out, she spots Sasaki leaving the store and quietly gazes at him for a moment. Later that same day, Yamada catches up with Sasaki while he's smoking outside the store, thanking him for stepping in with that arrogant customer earlier. On top of that, she takes the opportunity to apologize for always causing a backup at the register because of that clueless guy. Seeing her apologize for that, Sasaki tells her it wasn't her fault at all. Still, Yamada insists it all happened because of her poor customer service skills, apologizing to him once again. Seeing her so down, Sasaki admits he wasn't trying to play the hero, explaining that something bad had happened at his own job earlier, so he was already pretty stressed out. Seeing Yamada getting humiliated like that made his blood boil, sparking a sudden sense of justice that made him snap at the obnoxious customer. Sasaki adds that he just couldn't stand seeing that guy bash the register that always saves his day. Hearing him use the word saves, Yamada is left completely baffled about what he means. Sasaki goes on to shower her with praise, explaining that she's fast, careful, and efficient, which is why he feels she always saves him time and hassle. Yamada hesitantly asks if she's really all that great despite being moody and unkempt, but Sasaki tells her that he sees how hard she works, which is why he never understands why she talks down about herself like that. Hearing those words, Yamada looks back on all her quiet effort, how she always pushed herself to be quick and efficient at the register, yet constantly felt she was falling short, all because she struggled to manage a natural smile. With that, Yamada bursts into tears. Seeing her break down, a panicked Sasaki frantically apologizes, worried he said something wrong to upset her. Still, she hesitates to buy into his praise, feeling deep down that she isn't cut out for the job after causing so much trouble for the store manager and other customers with her perceived shortcoming. Yamada chokes out that she truly wants to keep working there, but fears she just lacks the talent for it. Sasaki gently reassures her, saying that as long as she stays because she loves what she does, the skills will follow naturally through time and dedication. Right then, Yamada coughs from a stray puff of his cigarette smoke, making Sasaki apologize again and fuss over her in a flurry of worry. Yet seeing his over-the-top reactions to the smallest things brings a soft, genuine smile back to Yamada's face. Fast-forwarding to the present day, Goto gives Yamada the green light to take a break after finishing her interview. Yamada casually asks if the manager remembers the man who once stood up to that arrogant customer who used to harass her at the register. Keeping her focus on her work, Goto admits she doesn't recall that specific incident, pointing out that they've had to deal with countless difficult customers like that over time. Yamada's own memory starts to feel a bit hazy as well, realizing she can't quite picture the face of the man who rescued her that day. But as she describes his traits aloud, she ends up describing Sasaki himself, yet still fails to connect that mystery man with the current Sasaki. Shrugging it off, she simply wonders where that guy ended up, musing to herself about where he might be enjoying a smoke right now. And well, my friends, what an incredible story, right? Let me know down in the comments what your favorite part was and what you're expecting for the next season. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Until next time.